Garden Basics with Farmer Fred is brought to you by Smart Pots, the original lightweight, long-lasting fabric plant container. It's made in the USA. Visit smartpots.com/Fred for more information and a special discount. That's smartpots.com/Fred. Welcome to the Garden Basics with Farmer Fred podcast. If you're just a beginning gardener or you want good gardening information, well, you've come to the right spot. If you live in USDA Zone 9, chances are you have attempted to grow an avocado tree. Sure, it's easy. Well, if you live in Santa Barbara, Ventura, or San Diego, where the temperature range is between 50 and 85 degrees usually. But for the rest of us, growing avocados is a challenge. Tom Spellman of Dave Wilson Nursery says he can make it a heck of a lot easier for you to grow backyard avocados throughout USDA Zone 9. He's got the tips. And the plant of the week? It's a low water use succulent that attracts squadrons of hummingbirds. It's the coral yucca. Warren Roberts of the UC Davis Arboretum tells us all about it. It's all on episode 113 of the Garden Basics with Farmer Fred podcast, brought to you today by Smart Pots and Dave Wilson Nursery. And we'll do it all in under 30 minutes. Let's go. If you live in USDA Zone 9, you may have had the dream of growing an avocado in your backyard. Can you? Maybe. It depends. Good luck. Well, people love avocados, and all that love kind of overrides the common sense of a lot of gardeners in USDA Zone 9 who are trying to grow avocados. Let's check in with Tom Spellman of Dave Wilson Nursery. He is not unfamiliar at all with avocado trees, and if he would wear a pom-pom dress, he would be the biggest cheerleader for growing avocados that are not Ventura, Santa Barbara, and San Diego, I think. Is that right, Tom?
That is absolutely true, Fred. And no, I'm not going to wear a pom-pom dress.
Okay. All right.
But I am one of the world's biggest fans of growing avocados. And I think that from my perspective, over the 40 years that I've been doing this, avocados are probably some of the most rewarding trees that I have ever put in. I just absolutely love avocados. My wife and I try and eat an avocado or half an avocado every day. And, you know, with a few different varieties, you know, the nice thing about avocados is they hold on the tree for many, many months. So really with 3 or 4 varieties, you can pick avocados every single day of the year, which is absolutely wonderful because at $1 a piece or $1.50 a piece, or I've even seen some varieties like Reed in the farmer's market for $5 a fruit, and that's getting expensive. Being able to go out and look at those on your tree is very, very rewarding. There are definitely some challenges with growing avocados, even in Zone 9. So one of the things that people really need to be aware of is avocados need fast draining soil. And that's why when you look at the commercial groves, when they plant a new commercial avocado grove, they will run their north-south rows about 3 to 4 feet high and plant up on the berm of those rows, or they'll create an individual mound that's 2 or 3 or 4 feet high for each tree, because they want to get that top root up above the grade level. If you plant an avocado below grade or even at grade, if your soil's even slightly heavy, you're probably going to lose that tree in a year to 2 years. And that's an investment. You don't want to lose that investment. So you want to make sure that either you have really fast draining soil or you're planting on some kind of a rise. Create a raised bed. Just create a mound. Just keep that top root up above your native grade level so that top root can oxygenate and breathe, and you'll have a healthy avocado tree.
Yeah, if you got the weather that cooperates with you.
Absolutely. So that's probably the number one most important concern, is making sure that you have the drainage, making sure you have that top root aeration. Another thing that people don't really realize is avocados are very, very susceptible to sun scald and sunburn damage. So when you look at a young avocado tree, the bark is green. It's very, very tender. I mean, the The wood is very fleshy. It's not like the wood of an apple tree or the wood of a peach tree or something like that. You can break it very easily, or you can damage it very easily. So it is very susceptible to sunburn. So this time of year is a good time to make sure that you're protecting that tree from sun damage through the summer months. And I don't mean by putting an umbrella over it or putting a shade canopy over it. You don't want to shade the tree. You want to protect the bark. So whitewash is coming into play. When I say whitewash, I mean you can buy over-the-counter products at most retail garden centers. You can buy a tree trunk white or Arizona tree paint. There's several brands out there. In fact, not even all of them are white anymore. You can buy beige if you want. It just needs to be a light, neutral color. And typically, if I'm using either just a water-based latex type paint, or if I'm using one of those over-the-counter tree protectors, I am going to lighten that product up by 2/3 with water.
2/3?
2/3. 1/3 paint, 2/3 water. You're not painting the house or painting a fence. All you're doing is putting a light coating on all of that young, tender, green exposed bark. Now, the commercial guys, I was just looking at an avocado grove the other day up in Santa Barbara County, where they just planted many, many acres of new trees. And instead of going through and whitewashing the structure itself, they used I believe it was a kaolic clay, and they fined it down, diluted it with water and ran it through with some sort of a filter, and they actually applied it with a sprayer to the foliage and to the trunk, concentrating very, very heavily on the southwest face. I mean, that's the area where that hot afternoon sun is coming in and doing most of the damage to avocado. It's not being damaged on the east side from morning sun. It's not being damaged on the north side where there's really not much sun exposure. It's that hot afternoon sun in July, August, and September. So it's coming in from that hot afternoon exposure from the southwest. So that is the area that needs to be protected the most against sunburn.
We should point out for the do-it-yourselfers that if you're making your own whitewash, that paint, that white latex paint, should be interior white latex paint, not exterior white latex
Correct.
Paint mixed with 66% water.
Make sure that it's not an oil base or not an acrylic base. It needs to be strictly water base. And like I said, you're not painting the fence, so you can cut it by 50%, or for me, 2/3 with water, and apply it that way. So I'm not trying to make it look like it's this pure white tree. I just want to protect that bark from that hot afternoon sun exposure.
What are the best varieties for those who don't live in Santa Barbara, San Diego, Ventura, and want to grow some avocados that in areas of USDA Zone 9 where there's more variability in the temperatures? When you're talking Santa Barbara, that's like Sunset Zone 24, where the temperature very seldom varies between 50 and 80 or whatever. And if you live in an area of USDA Zone 9 where temperatures can get up to 100 degrees or down to 32 or 35 degrees, well, that may require protection, but are there varieties that can take a wider temperature range?
Absolutely, Fred. The Mexican varieties are typically hardier in both their susceptibility to frost issues and also their susceptibilities to heat issues. So a lot of varieties like Mexicola or Mexicola Grande or Stewart are probably the top three. And then you have other varieties like Bacon or Zutano that have some Mexican parentage. Fuerte is actually has some Mexican parentage in it. So those varieties are going to take temperature extremes on the high side and on the low side better than the true Guatemalan type. The true Guatemalan type would be like a Hass. That's one that you can certainly grow it in areas where you get 32 degrees in the winter and 100 degrees in the summer, but it's going to require a little more protection, where the Mexican types are normally much less susceptible to that severe weather damage. Also seem to have a tougher leaf, and they're less susceptible to wind damage as well. Those are good varieties to consider. And honestly, Stewart, I think, is one of my favorite avocado varieties. It's a little compact grower. It only gets about 15 to 20 feet, maybe a little bit bigger than that if it's kept unchecked. But again, you can easily size manage it to a size that's manageable for you. And it is just a deep green leaf. It blooms for a long period of time. It's a good sized fruit, up to about a pound, and the seed is not all that large. So it's a smooth, dark skin variety, very, very creamy. I have been picking Stewart's beginning in about the end of October, and I picked my last one about March 15th.
Oof. All right. And that was developed.
Nice long season.
I believe the Stewart was developed in San Bernardino County, and in San Bernardino County, you can get really hot in the summertime.
Absolutely. So that's a good selection. But, the thing you want to consider with avocados, if you're in a zone where you can be successful with them, is grow some successive ripening varieties. You don't want to limit yourself to one, although almost any variety is going to give you 3 months, 4 months, 5 months worth of fruit. But if you were to plant, say, a Hass that's ripe right now, you're going to get fruit March, April into mid to late summer, and then follow that with a reed. So you're going to get reed starting in early summer and producing right up until about October or November. And then you have one of those Mexican types like a Stewart or maybe a Bacon or a Zutano. So now you've got fruit in the fall. It's going to be late August into September and holding on the tree until January. And then you put in a Fuerte or a Pinkerton or a variety like that that's going to give you that wintertime fruit beginning in December, January, and producing right up until mid-season when the Hass is in fruit. So with 4 varieties, successive ripening varieties, and you've got your A-type and your B-type flowers in there for good cross-pollination, now you can go out and pick at least 2 varieties of fruit almost every day of the year. And there's nothing better than fresh avocados out of your backyard, especially if the ones you're buying in the store aren't of very good quality and you're paying $1 a piece for them.
Avocado trees that I have seen succeed here in Sacramento County have some commonalities, and that is placement. And usually it's in an area that's getting reflected heat in the wintertime from a south or a west-facing wall. Plus, it's surrounded by a patio, some sort of concrete surface that also reflects heat. And there's also protection from the wind as well. And it never gets bigger than the house, to give you an idea of where it gets affected by the colder temperatures. But that makes sense to me, is basically grow it as a tall shrub and not necessarily a 50-foot tree.
Absolutely. You don't need a shade tree that you're going to hang a hammock in. You want something that you can manage. Now, another nice thing about avocados, as opposed to a peach or a plum or a nectarine, is they do hold on the tree for a long time. And I found early on when I first started planting avocado trees in my landscape, the neighbors are always looking over the fence. Oh, those Fuertes are looking pretty good. And every time my daughter comes over, she's got the Trader Joe's bag in her hand, and she walks right out to the backyard and picks a few fruit. She was here yesterday, and she picked about a dozen of my reed even before that. I'm really happy with them, but
it's your daughter. What are you going to do? Yeah,
it's a coveted fruit, and I found that an 8-foot tree didn't really give me enough. But I also found that a 10-foot pole and a basket picker gave me the ability to go out once a week and pick 6 or 8 or 10 fruit and take them in and ripen them up on the kitchen counter. And that tree now was easy to manage. If I had to go out and pick 500 plums with a 10-foot basket picker, that would be another story. But 8 or 10 avocados takes a minute, and now I've got avocados for a week. So my management philosophy on size management with avocados and things that hold on the tree for a long time, that just increased dramatically. Now I can go out and manage a 15-foot tree with a 10-foot pole and a basket picker just as easy as I could manage an 8-foot plum tree.
Where is the best place to store them after you've picked them, on the counter or in the refrigerator?
I find that if you put them in the refrigerator as soon as you pick them, it takes a lot longer for them to begin to physically mature and soften. If you leave them on the kitchen counter for a few days and let them begin to soften, I don't want them to the point where starting to spoil, but you can just feel a little give. That's when I'm going to put them into the refrigerator, and then I can take them out anytime and one more day on the counter and they're ready to go.
You know, the one thing we didn't talk about and we should talk about is winter protection. We talked about summer protection with whitewash. What is the best ways to protect avocados where temperatures in the wintertime might drop below 40 degrees?
If you have a low canopied tree, like, the backyard orchard philosophy that we've discussed so many times, then you can easily throw a Tyvek sheet over it or some plastic or something like that and keep it protected during the winter. And what I found a lot of people are doing is they're actually just running some lights up through the canopy of that tree during the winter months. And this is a great use for your antiquated Christmas lights that you haven't put up in 10 years anyway. So you can run some of those up and around your tree. So you're creating just enough warmth to keep that low, frost off of the tree. And frost always settles straight down. So if you can keep some lights up in the top third of the tree, you're going to allow for enough heat distribution there to keep that tree from freezing. And it works incredibly well. Just be safe. You don't want that out there plugged in on a rainy night, and you want to make sure that you're respecting the cords and things like that. But I've probably found more people having success using some sort of lighting than anything else as far as winter protection.
And these are bulbs that actually emanate some heat, like the old C7 or C9 Christmas tree bulbs. I've even known people who have hung shop lights in the trees.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, and anything just to break that nighttime chill. And that's all you really have to do. And it only has to be from that point where you're, I've never even done it at 31 or 32, but once you get down into the 20s, that's when you want to make sure that you're protecting. I think that's when the damage is really going to be done. And if you're in an area where you can get down into the teens, then maybe avocados aren't your thing to begin with.
There we go. Yes, indeed. It's Tom Spellman of Dave Wilson Nursery, wholesale grower of fruit and nut trees. But Tom, not avocados.
No, Dave Wilson doesn't do avocados, but, that's a part of my history growing up in this industry, and avocados and citrus will always be a passion of mine.
I love it. I love it. Tom Spellman, thanks so much for the avocado lessons.
Thanks for the opportunity, Fred.
You've heard me talk about Smart Pots, the award-winning fabric planter here on the Garden Basics podcast. They're durable and reusable. I've been using mine for 5 years now, and once again, they're being pressed into service in my yard. I have this problem. I grow too many tomatoes for the amount of allotted sunny space I have for them. So those extra tomato plants go into the Smart Pots. I place them in scattered areas around the yard where I know they'll get enough sun, which is a premium in my yard. And even 5 years later, I can pick up those Smart Pots, plant and all, and move them around without fear of the Smart Pot tearing or ripping. Smart Pot's breathable fabric creates a healthy root structure for plants. And Smart Pots come in a wide variety of sizes and colors. Visit smartpots.com/Fred for more information about the complete line of Smart Pots lightweight fabric containers. And don't forget that /Fred part, because on that page are details of discounts where you can buy Smart Pots at Amazon. Okay, now I understand maybe you want to see the Smart Pots before you buy them. That's not a problem. Smart Pots are available at independent garden centers and select Ace and True Value stores nationwide. To find a store near you, visit smartpots.com/Fred. Are you thinking of growing fruit trees? Well, you probably have a million questions, like which fruit trees will grow where I live? What are the tastiest fruits? How do I care for these trees? The answers are nearby. They're just a click away with the informative Fruit Tube video series at davewilson.com. That's Dave Wilson Nursery, the nation's largest grower of fruit trees for the backyard garden. They've got planting tips, taste test results, links to nurseries in your area that carry Dave Wilson fruit trees. Your harvest to better health begins at davewilson.com. Every week, we like to talk with Warren Roberts. He's the Superintendent Emeritus of the University of California Davis Arboretum and Public Garden. He knows his plants, and he always has a great plant for us every week. And people love the succulents these days. And here is one from the agave family that I think is going to do quite well for much of the United States, especially if you're below the Mason-Dixon line or up into the mid-Atlantic coast states, and certainly here in California. It's the Warren, you tell us, what plant is this?
Well, I call it the coral yucca. It's sometimes called red yucca, and it's Hesperaloe parviflora. Hesperaloe means, by the way, the aloe from the west. And in this case, it's native to Texas, New Mexico, down into Mexico, and is a very tough plant. Like many succulents, it doesn't need a lot of water. It does best in well-drained soil, but it's not that fussy. The leaves look ferocious. They look like they're spine-tipped. In fact, you can use it as a barrier, but if somebody happens to fall in it, they're not going to get wounded. Its bark is worse than its bite, I guess you might say. The flowers are typically coral colored, and the flowering stem comes up out of the ground kind of like a pink asparagus spike. And then it grows taller and branches. Usually it doesn't grow straight up. It kind of curves one way or the other, and then produces branchlets which develop the flowers. This is one of the best of all hummingbird plants. In fact, one of the common names in Spanish-speaking parts of the world is Yucca colibri. Yucca colibri. Colibri is a common name for hummingbird in the Spanish-speaking parts of the world, or Yucca chuparosa, or Yucca chupamirto. These are all Spanish names for this plant. Another Spanish name is samandoque. Whatever we call it, a red yucca by any other name would be the same, I guess. And I've seen it in mass plantings, which are very effective. It's kind of new in cultivation in California. I think I saw my first one back in the 1970s and fell in love with it right away. It was growing across the street from where I live, and found out what it was. It's used a lot in Arizona in horticulture. You see mass plantings in the divider strips in highways, and there are some select forms that have been done. Mountain States Nursery has done some selection for shorter flower stems and more pure red flowers. I think there's one called Stoplight. It's just a beautiful bright red. And there's also a very pale yellow one that's been developed. And it's easy to plant, easy to divide. And I remember one that didn't seem to be doing very well in the Arboretum. And I dug it up, and actually the ground squirrels had eaten out the inside of it. So the tufts of leaves, I simply took them, stripped off the leaves down to bare stem, and stuck them in the ground, and they took off fine. So you can plant it even without roots. I got my start from the late Margaret Williams in Sparks, Nevada. She gave one of my sisters was living in what was this town? Oh, I can't remember the name now, but a very harsh climate town. And I asked Margaret Tonopah. There we go.
Tonopah.
I asked Tonopah.
Halfway between Margaret, Reno and Vegas. Yeah.
That's right. The Ms. Pa Hotel. At any rate, Margaret gave me some plants for my sister's garden, and one of them was red yucca. So I forget how many that she gave me, but I took one, and rather than plant it in my sister's garden, I planted it in my own garden, and I fell in love with it. Incidentally, if the stem gets broken, the flowering stem gets broken, don't take it out. Cut it back to where there's some small leaves clasping the stems. Cut it back to one of those small leaves, and it will branch out and bloom again. So you could even take it as a cut flower, but don't take the whole thing. Just take the top part, and it will bloom again in that season. It starts with us. It starts blooming. It starts showing color in early spring, and then blooms until frost. And actually, in mild areas, it seems to bloom all year. But the thing is, don't cut off the flowering stems. If they show any green at all, cut them back a little bit, and they'll produce flowers again for you.
And whenever you see a plant description that says the plant requires moderate to little water, that means it doesn't want to be planted in an area where drainage is too slow. So you may want to plant this one on a mound or even in a large container.
Yes, and in areas that have dry summers, you once it's established, you probably only need to water it every 2 or 3 weeks, and it still will look good.
It's the Hesperaloe parviflora, also known as, I was hoping you'd fill it in.
Oh, also known as red yucca, or more accurately, coral yucca.
The coral yucca, Hesperaloe parviflora. What a great plant of the week, a low water use plant that attracts hummingbirds, beautiful flowers, and those spikes on those flowers, they can reach 8 or 9 feet tall?
I guess they could, although most of the time they get about 4 feet tall. And you don't want to plant it too close to a path because the leaves get to be about 3 feet long sometimes. So you need a bit of room for it. Easy to grow.
All right, Hesperaloe parviflora. Warren Roberts is the Superintendent Emeritus of the University of California Davis Arboretum and Public Garden. If you don't live in Davis, heck, you can visit the Arboretum online. Find out about all their wonderful plants at arboretum.ucdavis.edu. Warren, thanks so much for the plant of the week.
You're welcome, Fred.
Garden Basics comes out every Tuesday and Friday and is brought to you by Smart Pots. It's available just about anywhere, and that includes Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Stitcher, and Google Podcasts. And for Northern California gardeners, it's the Green Acres Garden Podcast with Farmer Fred. It's available also wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for listening, subscribing, and leaving comments. And thanks for listening.